Welcome to The Creative Influencer, where we discuss all things creative with an emphasis on influencers. The Creative Influencer is hosted by John Pfeiffer. John is an entertainment attorney in Santa Monica, California, who represents influencers and other creatives.
This is episode 4 of the third season of the Creative Influencer podcast. Today we interview Ricky Williams. Ricky is a Renaissance man and a multi-faceted influencer. He's an elite professional athlete with a wide-ranging curiosity that has led him to study herbal medicine and astrology. Ricky is currently the Chief Herbal Officer of Real Wellness, a CBD company based in Venice, California. In many ways, Ricky's always been ahead of his time and has been a trailblazer in his path from Heisman Trophy winner to healer. This is a fun journey that I can't wait for you to go with us on. I'm joined today by Ricky Williams. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
You are a former football player.
Yep.
Won the Heisman Trophy.
In 1998.
And we'll come back to it. Played in the NFL for many years.
I think I played 11 seasons.
And then you did a complete pivot to you are now, I've heard you describe yourself as a healer.
Uh-huh.
And you're an astrologer.
Yeah. You know, this pivot actually occurred in the middle of my playing career. And it's all started in 2004 when I retired for the first time.
And I want to come back to that and do a deep dive and just kind of do an overview.
Yeah.
Then you formed a company called Real Wellness with your wife.
Yep.
Okay. I've heard you said that we all have a path and you have to listen to the pings.
Yep.
I want to take you through your path because it's a fascinating path. As somebody who only knew the football side and now knows a lot more about the other side, it's interesting. So you grew up in San Diego.
Yeah.
Father was a minister.
Sure. So my father was, and my mother's mother, and my father's mother. So I grew up in a family
of ministers.
Sure did. Yeah.
And religion was a big part of your life through, or at least until high school?
Up through high school. I'd say I probably started to stop being so interested in religion and church about the same time that football became important.
When did you realize you were a good athlete?
I realized I was a good athlete fairly early on. I think kindergarten. We used to, my teacher, Miss Swartz, would make us run 2 laps around the field every morning. And
burn off kindergarten energy?
I mean, I think she just was really into fitness. And so we would start every morning. We'd go outside and run 2 laps. And I remember the first couple of times, I wasn't very excited about having to run around this big field a couple of times. And then I think one day I just clicked that maybe I should try to be first and see how that feels. And so I ran as fast as I could, and I smoked everyone in the group, and it felt really good to be the fastest kid in class, and that was really the beginning of my athletic career.
You know what's interesting is a lot of times kindergarten athletes don't carry through, but obviously the athletic ability carried through.
Well, it carried through because it's something that I took pride in. It's something that became part of my identity, and you know, I took pride in being the fastest kid in the first grade and in the second grade and the third grade and
through high school,
probably. And also I went to an elementary school that it was a magnet program for sports, and so we had an hour of physical education every day, and we made a big deal about our field day, our junior Olympics, and it was a big focus of the school I attended.
And then ultimately you went to Texas to college. How did you, a kid from San Diego, how did you pick Texas?
Well, I was recruited by pretty much every college in the country, and I consider myself an adventurous person. And so, although USC was attractive and even San Diego State was attractive, a big part of me wanted to explore and experience another place, another culture. And with that in the back of my mind, as I sought out looking for different universities, I went on recruiting trips. And in my mind, I had an idea of what I wanted to get out of the college football experience. I think number one on my list was I wanted to go to a big program where I would be able to display my talent for a lot of people. I wanted to go to a university that had a rich tradition. I wanted to be the missing piece of a really good team making it to the top. And I wanted to start as a freshman. And I think most importantly, I wanted the place to feel like family. And so as I went on my trips, I made a checklist, and Texas marked off
All the boxes.
all the boxes. Yep.
It obviously worked out.
Yeah, it did. It did.
Did you win the Heisman as a junior or a senior?
I won the Heisman as a senior. As a junior, I had a good year. I led the nation in rushing and scoring, but our team only won 4 games. And so when I came back from my senior year, I had my eyes set on winning the Heisman Trophy.
At what point did the university tell you that they were going to make you a Heisman candidate?
Well, it happened quite organically because of my junior season, and because I was the best running back and the highest scorer in college football. As soon as I decided to come back for my senior year, I was automatically the Heisman front runner. And as far as turning it into a campaign, it was Coach Mac Brown's first year, and our sports information director, the head media guy for Texas football, John Bianco, was one of my closest friends. And so I communicated to him how important it was for me to win the Heisman, and it was important for Coach Brown because it would be a good start to his first year at Texas. And so it all came together, and we all got on the same page, and John said he'll do what he has to do, and Coach Brent said he'll do what he has to do, and they said I have to do my job on the field and put up the numbers. Exactly.
I did a deep dive in Heisman campaigns. It's like I was curious where it started. And according to the internet, so take it with a grain of salt,
right.
It all started with Roger Staubach in 1963 because they didn't really know how to do it, so they sent out pamphlets called Meet Roger Staubach to the sports media. And then it's just kind of taken a life of its own.
Yeah.
So as a winner, and you ultimately won. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a winner, you get a vote in other potential candidates.
Right.
How much of a campaign, as somebody who gets a vote, do you receive? How much do you notice?
I don't think that they have the ability to really specifically go after specific voters. And so for me, it's just what reaches me from what I look at on ESPN, online, or what I hear on television about who are the front runners for the Heisman Trophy.
I'm going to jump ahead just a second because I saw it is the NCAA voted in October to permit college athletes to benefit from the use of their name, image, and likeness.
Yeah.
How much of a difference would that made for you as somebody that was like the marquee player for a period of time?
Well, it would have made a huge difference. I mean, the contrast was, back then when players did have a big name, that there was a lot of energy put towards protecting those players from, getting in trouble, talking to agents, receiving any kind of benefit for it. And so I think if things were the opposite, financially, I'm sure I would have benefited from it greatly. I don't know yet. I'm guessing that some players in college are mature enough to handle that, and I'm guessing the majority of them aren't.
Well, 18, 19, 20-year-old boys, men, probably are not.
Exactly. It'd be the rare person that was mature enough to be able to handle that.
When you were named a finalist, did the university give you coaching on how to do media relations?
They did not. A lot of media relations training is some universities will bring in someone to work with the team. Coach Makovic, who came before Coach Brown, he brought a media woman in to work with the team and give us basic guidelines on how to handle the media. And because especially if you're a star player in college, you're having to talk to the media on at least a couple times a week. You learn the hard way, but most coaches realize that we're kids and we need some help. But specifically for the Heisman Trophy, there wasn't any extra training.
And then you were drafted, a high draft pick. At what point did you get an agent?
Well, so I was a minor league baseball player coming out of high school, and so I had an agent for baseball pretty early on. I think my sophomore year, I hired an agent to help me with baseball stuff.
And did you use the same agent for football?
I did initially, but we had a falling out, and then I hired another agent who lasted about a year, and then we had a falling out, and then I hired my third agent, which was Lee Steinberg, and we stuck together for several years.
Yeah. As part of going into the NFL, because they have the press conferences afterwards and you're required to go, did they give you media training? Did the teams give you training? Well,
again, the teams are mandated, and I think it actually comes through the Players Association, where each, before or during training camp or during OTAs, we'll have a couple of members from the Players Association come and talk to the team and do like a team media training. And it's just the basics of the right attitude and how to approach it and some pointers, but nothing intensive.
Each player appears to have their own brand now. Was that part of the deal when you came into the NFL as well, that you were cognizant of your brand?
I think it's almost impossible, at least since the late 90s when I came out, to not be cognizant of your brand, because every time you go out in public, you're reminded that you have a brand. But I think it's slightly different now with social media. I think people can take more control over their brand. I think even in the late 90s, a large majority of our brand was dictated by our relationship and the way we were conveyed by the media. And I mean, it's something that frustrated me during my playing days. And I think I was one of the first players that started writing my own blog. This was, again, before social media, before players had really a voice or an outlet outside of media.
What was your blog called?
It was called Run, Ricky, Run.
Do you still have it?
No.
Is it still up?
I don't think it's still up.
I didn't find it when I was doing my deep dive.
I mean, it'd be hard. It'd be hard to find it. I'm sure there's some people who have made comments about how much they enjoyed the blog. I think that can still be found online, but no. And for me, it was just realizing that I'm a unique person, and that it's very difficult to ask members of the media who spend at most an hour with me a week to be able to convey who I am as a complex person. And so I took it on my own to share my point of view and my perspective with fans.
So you were on the early curve of this.
I was, very much so. Yeah.
And just for those who are not familiar with your stats, you ran for over 10,000 yards in 11 years.
Yes.
Now, as a running back, describe the pounding that your body takes.
Yeah, well, I think out of all the positions on the football field, running backs probably take the most pounding, and mainly because most positions, it's a physical game, but it's usually one or two people on each play that you have to engage with. But as a running back, especially when I'm carrying the ball, the other 11 guys on the other side
are all
trying to get me. And so a lot of times in the course of one play, I'll get hit 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 times.
How did you take care of your body? How did you recover from that?
Well, I think at the beginning of my career, football is quite obviously a young man's sport, and I think that's probably the main reason is our ability to recover seems to diminish as we age. And so when I was young, I think it's just genetics. I was able to recover, but as I started to get older, I had to find more creative ways and effective ways to take care of myself. The typical way that athletes take care of themselves are taking pills to deal with the pain and hopefully using nutrition to keep themselves strong. But the pounding I took, I started to experiment with yoga, meditation, different alternative healing modalities. I was open to doing whatever I could to try to help myself recover and feel better.
Did yoga help?
Oh, yoga helped immensely. I found yoga during my year off in 2004. And before I found yoga, I had really bad shoulders and ankles. And after just several weeks of practicing yoga, for the majority of my ankle and shoulder problems resolved.
Do you continue to practice?
I do, yeah. I mean, I find if I'm not doing some kind of yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong, that my body will start to hurt.
Kind of a change, but who was the most mindful teammate that you had throughout your NFL career?
Well, I think there's different kinds of mindfulness. I mean, as far as mindful of the game of football and the way they approached it.
Or just mindful. Well, let's do that, and then we'll go.
Yeah, I would say probably Zach Thomas played linebacker with me in Miami, and if he's not already, he will be a Hall of Fame player. And just playing with him, he just always knew where the ball was and what was going on. He just was very mindful of the way he approached his craft.
What about mindful, just spiritual mindfulness?
I don't know. I don't feel like that at least on the teams that I played with, that there are very many players who were. And I just think, to a certain extent, to be successful in the NFL, football kind of has to be your religion, and there's not always a lot of time or space to cultivate any other types of mindfulness.
And then it was 2004 that you took the year off.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the journey you went on during that year off.
Yeah. I think the hardest part of the journey was, kind of shaking myself free from the NFL. And then once I did, I felt a huge sense of relief. Like, I don't have the pressure to be this thing anymore. I can kind of explore and be whatever I want to be. And that, for me, that was, it was exciting. And one of the things that I've always wanted to do my whole life is to travel. And so I realized that I had time and I had enough money to travel. And so I got on a plane, and my first place I went to Samoa, and I spent a couple days there, and then I went to Fiji, spent a couple days there. Then I hopped on over to Australia, and I spent a couple of months there. And the beautiful part about that was, experiencing this different kind of freedom for the first time in my life, in my adult life for sure, and being able to interact and meet people from different walks of life, different cultures, and they really served as a mirror for me. And it was for the first time in my life that I got a truer reflection of who I was outside of, being defined as an athlete or a football player.
Because you'd gone straight through. From
High
school to college to the NFL.
Yeah. Not a year off. We had off seasons, but most of the off seasons nowadays are preparing for the season. Exactly. And so there wasn't much time for me to explore any parts of myself outside of my, being a football player.
And at some point, you started studying herbs.
Yes. And so it's kind of interesting. The idea of synchronicity, that certain meaningful coincidences kept showing up in my life. And the time where it dawned on me that maybe football, maybe my time as a football player was coming to an end, was elicited by a conversation I had with a concierge at my condo building about seasons changing. It was late May, early June, and we were talking about any upcoming parties. And he said, in Miami, the season ends after Memorial Day, and people don't start coming back and having a good time until November, December. And it just dawned on me, okay, I realized in nature, seasons naturally change. Right. And then I started thinking, is this, the season of football in my life coming to an end? And the idea resonated. It was meaningful for me. And so I really kind of got enraptured by this idea of seasons changing. And so I'm in Australia traveling, and I meet a guy at the hostel I'm staying at, and he gives me a book on Ayurveda. And at the time, I had no idea what Ayurveda was.
And what is it?
So Ayurveda is a medical science from India. Ayur means life, and Veda means study. And so an alternative healing modality from India that's been around for arguably 2,000 to 5,000 years. And it's more of a nature-based philosophy. The idea of, in order for us to be healthy, we have to live in accord with the seasons. And that was the first chapter of this book. And so, it caught my attention, and of course I devoured the book. And several months later, when I came back to the States and realized that I needed to find some kind of skill set, because I'd been a football player my whole life, and now I was a civilian. I had to learn how to do something other than play football. And so when I thought of, okay, what kind of training am I going to need? I had to spend some time reflecting on, okay, now that I'm not a football player, who am I? And as I racked my memory, I kept being reminded of situations where I shared some information or advice with someone, and somehow it made them feel better. And so this idea of being a healer really resonated with me. And so I went online and I looked up, are there any places in America to study Ayurveda? And of course, there's a place in Northern California and the semester started in 2 weeks. And so I drove up to Northern California, enrolled in school, and started studying Ayurveda. And coming from being a football player in this alternative yoga healing world, it was kind of scary.
It's 180 degrees.
It's kind of scary and way outside my comfort zone, but something about it really spoke to who I was on the inside. It spoke to my heart. And so I sopped it up. I mean, I was in heaven, you know. I was really enjoying interacting with a new perspective, a new worldview. In India, all of the yogic sciences are based essentially on spirituality and on religion. And so I think engaging in that community and in that coursework really reawakened my spiritual roots. And for me, I found a worldview that was more inclusive than the Christian worldview that I had outgrown as a teenager. And it connected me directly, you know, to the idea of becoming and training as a healer. And one of the major tools in the Ayurvedic system, also in the Chinese system, are the use of herbs. And so I dove in, and considering, you know, part of my exit from the NFL was because I used an herb that I wasn't supposed to use. You know, that I had a heightened personal interest in understanding plants, herbs, and how they interact with humans in our lives.
And that was cannabis.
And that was cannabis, yes.
Yeah. Now, just prediction time. I heard that Rob Gronkowski, said that if the NFL allowed CBD, which I didn't realize they didn't allow CBD,
right,
he would consider a comeback.
Yeah.
Do you think there'll come a time when the NFL does allow CBD, does allow cannabis?
I think the time for this NFL to allow CBD is right around the corner. And I think, you know, cannabis, you know, THC, I think that's gonna come probably after federal legalization, but that's not, you know, there's a good chance that's not too far away either.
Right.
I just think it's you know, so much of what the NFL does, I think, is dependent on public opinion. I mean, they say it's for player safety, but I think the argument that cannabis is bad for players is not as stable as it was. Or
well, even if you just take cannabis out of the picture and talk CBD, just the anti-inflammatory effects of it.
Yeah,
you would think they'd want the athletes to use it.
Well, to me, you know, when the conversation goes this direction, because I know about more herbs than just cannabis, and that's really the whole idea behind starting Real Wellness is my experience of getting in trouble for cannabis and then learning about herbs. And, you know, a funny story on my yogic Ayurvedic journey was I was in a car driving up the Himalayas with my yoga teacher. And we were going to fast.
And who doesn't? Everybody. Drive up the car.
Right. So we're driving up the Himalayas, and you know, and I'm a total yogi now by this point. And I'm looking out of the window, and I just see growing wild fields of marijuana, fields of cannabis just growing. And it's one thing to grow up in a culture where you're told if you do this that your brain is going to turn into, you know, scrambled eggs.
Right.
And it's another thing when you're, you know, in nature and you see this plant growing wild. And for me, it was important to have the personal experience of these things. And Real Wellness for me is about taking all that I've learned from my personal journeys and experiences about herbs in general, and you know, most specifically about cannabis, and sharing that information in the form of products that people can actually use to help themselves feel better.
And we've referred to it, you just referred to it again, Real Wellness. That's a company that you formed with your wife.
Yes.
I've heard that she describes your position as the chief herbal officer.
The chief herbal officer. Yeah. I'm the one that has the most information about the herbs, and my main role in the company is coming up with our formulas.
And so, what kind of herbs do you offer? If a potential client came to you and said, I mean, how does it work?
So it's interesting. So as an herbalist, we're trained in differential diagnosis, and what that means is, for instance, if you go to allopathic Western doctor and you say I have a headache, he'll prescribe you medicine for a headache, right? And he has different drugs that he'll give you for a headache. If you come to an herbalist and you say I have a headache, our job is to understand, okay, what's causing the headache? And so we do detective work to find out, okay, what's the underlying cause of the headache? And then with our knowledge of herbal medicines, we will prescribe an herbal formula that will help correct whatever is causing the headache.
The underlying.
Yeah. And so it's easier with the traditional medicinal model to mass market certain things and say, this is for headaches. Okay. But for us, as an herbalist, I might go to my formulas teacher and say, what's a good formula for headaches? And she'll look at me and she'll suck her teeth and she'll say, it depends on what's causing the headache. And so for me, when I thought about, okay, how do I create herbal products that can deal with the masses? And then I thought about there's certain diseases, and when I say disease, I mean lack of ease. There's certain diseases that are caused by modern culture, by just the world that we live in now.
The anxiety.
Exactly. And so we have a formula for anxiety, and also topicals, right? Everyone gets bumps and bruises, and the action of the topical is to increase healthy blood flow to an area. So anytime there's stagnation, which comes with inflammation, right? The topical, we know with the herbs in the topical that it's going to help someone deal with pain and bruising. We have an optimized formula, which, the way I looked at medicine and wellness coming from an athlete was, yes, if I have a sprained ankle, I have to find a way to get it healthy. But ultimately, everything I do to prepare myself to play is about performance enhancement. And so our optimized formula, it's a flexibility formula. And so the action of the herbs in the formula limits inflammation, it relaxes muscles, and it increases systemic blood flow. So if there's places where you're tight, taking this formula will help loosen those things up. But so someone who's an athlete, a yogi, a golfer, they're going to get instant benefit because they're going to feel better when they are performing yoga or playing golf. But the average person is going to benefit from this formula because, tension, right? We all have stress and tension that we
So sitting there, my neck is up.
that we hold in our body, and this formula can help release and relax some of that tension. And especially, for me, this is where the mindfulness comes in. This is something that I've just currently been thinking about, is the thought form that's created when people move to use our products in and of itself is a healing thought form. The idea that I'm taking something natural, something that comes from the earth, to help myself deal with something that's going on with me. To me, just that idea is helping someone feel better.
Now, does somebody have to come to you get these products, or can they get them off your website?
They can get them off of our website. I mean,
the address?
It's shoprw.life. When we first started off Real Wellness, we had 2 CBD products and we had 5 THC products. The THC products also had CBD, but because of the crazy regulations in the state of California, we decided, we better spending our energy creating products that we can get into the hands of a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And so we made a shift to only producing CBD formulas, but as soon as the regulations change or we find relationships in other states, because we believe that the whole plant is healing.
And I want to shift. That's a perfect segue to astrology.
Yes.
How did you discover astrology?
It's the same vein. So I was in Northern California studying Ayurveda, and it's a yogic science. And so part of our classwork was a Swami, essentially a yogic monk from the ashram that was down the street, would come to our school and teach us a class twice a week. And after the first class, I remember getting up after relaxation and going to the teacher and saying, that was the most relaxed and clear-headed I've been in my whole life. I need to find more of this. And he said, we have an ashram just 20 minutes down the road. You should come this weekend and take a class. And so that next weekend, I somehow garnered up the courage to go to this weird ashram place and experience it, and took the class in the morning. And again, I love the yoga class. And then I stayed for brunch, and the head teacher, Swami Sita, came to me, and someone had told her that I was a professional football player. And so she walked up to me and she said, "Where's your Mars?" And at the time, I had no idea what she was talking about.
My Mars is far out back.
I just looked at her and I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And she looked and she said, where's your Mars? And I said, I don't know. And then she said, well, after you're done eating, come to my house. I want to talk to you about something. And so her house was at the top of the hill in the ashram. And so I walked up to her house after I ate. And she asked me if I knew what time I was born. And part of, my personal story is I have a twin sister. And so the time we were born is something that's a big part. I've always known that.
You've known that story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I told her what time I was born, and she put the information into her computer. And then we had a 3-hour conversation. And after the conversation, I don't remember the details of the conversation. I just remember how I felt after the conversation. And the way I felt is this woman who from Vietnam, who I've never met before, who has no idea about me or where I come from, seems to see me more clearly than anyone I've ever been around. And
she wasn't a Saints fan.
She wasn't a Saints fan. I don't think she even knew what the Saints were. And so after that conversation,
I heard an interview. I'm sorry to digress.
No, it's okay.
I heard an interview where they talked about you were in the NFL and you then went on to win the Heisman.
Yeah.
No.
It doesn't work like that. Yeah, but people don't understand.
But no, it's just a different world.
It's a completely different world. And just that she had this tool looking at the chart that could help her see me clearly. And at the time I was really lost and really wanting to see myself and understand myself more clearly. And so I started studying astrology with her, and that was about almost 16 years ago.
And this is again 2004?
2004.
Now you played after that.
Yes.
How many years did you play after that?
I played another 6 years. I think I played another 6 years.
And then having started down the path with the healing and the astrology, how did that mesh with playing football?
Oh, what a great question. And so what I noticed is at first it didn't mesh. It didn't mesh very well. But
did you tell your teammates? Because I know the culture, the football culture.
My teammates already knew I was a little bit different. And I think after spending a year off doing a bunch of crazy stuff, as I started to tell the story, they were fascinated by it.
It's like, well, of course that's what you did.
Yeah, and it was cool. It became a place that I could bond with my teammates because I had such an interesting experience that I could share with them. And it seemed like every year I did a better job integrating the two different worlds, and it just took time, And I was really integrating two different parts of myself.
Right. And then at some point you decided to retire.
Yeah, and so I played several more years, and I became a free agent, and I was picked up by the Ravens, and I played 1 year for the Ravens. And after that year, I felt like I could have kept playing, but I just felt like my other interests outside of football were more interesting than my interest in continuing to play football, and so I decided to retire again.
How was that phone call? Did you call the team, or did you call your agent?
I called Coach Herbal. I called my team first, and so it was interesting. I don't know if you've come across this part of the story, but it was after we lost my last year. I was with the Ravens. We lost to the Patriots in the AFC Championship game on a missed field goal chip shot. Very, very easily could have been playing in my first Super Bowl, but we didn't. But my feeling after that was I was excited. I had a good season. It was the furthest in the playoffs I'd ever went, and I was feeling good. And I remember I had a conversation with Bill Parcells, who was the president of the Dolphins when I was there. And I told him how I was sharing with him how excited I was about the upcoming season. And what he said to me was, you can contribute in a lot of other ways. Don't be so hung up on being a football player. And him saying that really got me thinking. And I had a dream a couple nights later where I saw myself doing something completely different. And so I knew that Coach Herbal would appreciate that. And so I called him up and I told him the story, and he wished me the best. He wished me the best of luck.
They have a pretty good team this year.
Yeah, they have a great core. And it was, the funny thing is, at the time I retired, of course, all my friends, people close to me, tried to talk me out of it. But I knew in my heart that the Ravens would win the Super Bowl the next year, and I was still okay with retiring. And of course, they did win the Super Bowl the next year.
Yeah. I want to take you back to the astrology.
Yeah.
Because it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you before we started, I didn't know much about it until I started to prepare for this interview. And now it's just kind of an interesting topic.
Right.
It's a real interesting topic.
Yeah.
So you do readings.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard one of the first rules that you have is no judgment.
Well, yeah, that's a rule I try to I try to enforce on a daily basis in my life. Because to me, when, if you start judging things, I think you get lost. And for me, when I talk about astrology, I talk about the zodiac or the chart as a circle, and the circle as a symbol of wholeness. And in wholeness, everything has a place. And so a lot of what I do is helping people understand themselves and understand what place or what part the different drives or instincts that they have, what part they all play in the whole of their life.
And I've heard that you talk about helping people recognize the energy in their lives, and that you can help them understand the past by seeing what was actually there as opposed to what you remember.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a big one. And I think one of the main problems or questions in science right now is how do we define what a fact is? And quantum physics is now showing that that's blurry now, because just by observing an experiment, you alter the experiment. And my sense of what a chart can represent is a form of objectivity. An example is if something's going on in my life and I feel baffled by it, or I'm not sure what direction to go, I'll look at the chart and I'll look for symbols that identify to me that, for instance, we talked about the planet Mars, right? When Swami Sita asked where my Mars was.
Yeah, where is your Mars?
My Mars is in Aries, which is interesting. So Mars in a chart points to someone's aggressivity, their drive, right? And quite obviously, we watch TV and we see violence and it's a negative thing. But there's certain places we can go and find violence and it's considered a positive thing. In war, in athletics and sports.
Football.
Yeah, in football. That realizing that in life we're going to face stressful situations that are going to require us to stick up for ourselves. And sometimes in the process, other people are going to get hurt. This is a drive. This is an issue that we all have. A universal, Carl Jung called it an archetype, a universal energy that we all have to figure out and engage with in our lives. And so I realized if I'm in a situation where I'm feeling victimized, then I look to Mars and I see, okay, Mars is being triggered by something. So it's telling me that this is a process that I need to work on, is that I need to find a way to assert myself and defend what's important to me. And if I try to turn down this challenge, negativity will befall me. I have a perfect example. Perfect example. So 2007, I get reinstated to come back to the NFL. And I get reinstated right before the 10th week of the season. And so I practiced that whole week, and I'm with the Dolphins, and we're playing the Steelers on Monday Night Football. And I'm already thinking, I've only practiced a week where everyone else on the field has been here 10 weeks plus 6 weeks of training camp. So I'm far behind. And as we're flying into Pittsburgh, it's pouring down rain, okay? We get there, the next day we go to the football field, and there's about 2 inches of water sitting on top of the field. And I go out there for warm-ups, and no one can warm up because the field is so bad. And I'm telling myself, I probably should not be playing in this game. It doesn't seem like it's a good idea. But my whole thing in my life is to be tough and always try to fight through. And so I had this inner struggle. A part of me was saying, go tell the coach that you're not going to play because it's not safe for you to play out there. Yeah. But part of me said, no, I have to be tough. Okay. And so I chickened out.
Who's the coach at the time?
It's Cam Cameron, okay. Who's only there for a year. And there was more stress because they hadn't won a game. They were 0-9 at this point. And so they were hoping that I would help them win. And so I chickened out. I wasn't able to go up to him and say, I'm not going to play. First play of the second quarter, I get hit. The ball goes on the ground, and I'm pushing myself up to get the ball, and someone jumps on my back, and I tear my pec. Ooh. Okay? Tear my pec right off, and I'm done for the whole season. Right? And you'll see this constantly in clients' lives. Whenever they come up with in a Mars situation, energy where they have to display some kind of courage, whether that's inner courage or outer courage, and they succeed, right? There's usually the spoils of war. But if they chicken out and they don't, then the fierce Mars energy comes at them from a different way that's out of their control. And in my example, tearing my pec. Right. And I looked in my chart. There Mars was right on top of my moon in the area of profession. in the sign of Cancer. And interesting coincidence, Cancer rules the chest, right? And so I had an example of stick up for myself and take care of myself.
Right.
At work, I didn't, and I got hurt.
And then I also heard a term I had not heard before until I studied this with you, listening to your interview, about south nodes.
Yes. Wow.
The chart within the chart.
The chart within the chart.
And that it helps us learn what we're here to resolve.
Yeah.
You were a warrior before.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
All right, so the South Node, as a symbol, it represents unresolved stuff that we're here to work on, and more practically, how it manifests is a set of assumptions that we make about life that tend to lead us on a certain path. And so, for me, my South Node is in Aries. Aries is the sign of the warrior, and the planet Mars, which I just talked about, is right next to my South Node. So the indication is that I lived a life where bravery was what my life was all about. And, to go deeper into my South Node story, some circumstances that were larger than me kind of took over. And the sense that I was left with is that I failed in my ability to protect the people that were important to me. Okay. There's a common theme for indigenous cultures that at some point in their history the guns came and the shields and the spears didn't quite hold up, right? And so the idea of in a positive sense, the North Node can point to gifts, right? If someone has really embraced the idea of being a warrior, they're going to have success in life in anything that requires them to be tough and to be a warrior. And early in my life, kindergarten, right? I realized that I could
be the fastest kid.
I could be the fastest kid, right? This was fed in me quite early in my life, and it propelled me to that moment. It propelled me all the way to that moment that I realized maybe it's time for me to stop being a warrior, right? Maybe there's something else here to develop, and that's when my path made a 180 turn, and I moved from the warrior, and I started my path towards becoming a healer.
Now's as good a time to ask it as any. What's it like to be 20 years ahead of your time?
Well, it was tough when I was younger, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it was the way I was raised, and I think a lot of it was I really loved church when I was a kid, and I loved the stories of Jesus, and I really took them to heart. And this idea of, I was all in. And so I think because the foundation of my life, I had a really strong inner connection to myself, God, or whatever you want to call it. And so I learned at a young age to just trust myself. Even if the world didn't understand, I learned to trust that. I call it that crazy voice inside. Yeah. And I trusted it, and it got me into a lot of trouble, but somehow I was able to keep trusting it. And so I think when you are that far ahead of your time, you have to learn to not care so much what other people think, and you have to learn to trust yourself, and you have to learn to weather the storm. Because if you're ahead of your time, people don't have the ability to see what you see or understand. And so I think I learned to not blame other people for not being able to see, and to realize, this is a gift, and sometimes it feels like a curse or a burden. But I've learned that I wouldn't have it any other way. And I think most importantly, and I think I've learned this most from my marriage, my relationship, is to surround myself with people that appreciate the fact that I tend to see things before they actually come. And then I feel supported. And also I have the pieces in place that I can actually do something with this information.
You've been described by your wife as a communicator, and that you're very articulate, which is obvious.
Right.
And your favorite social media platform because of that is Twitter.
Yeah.
How did you gravitate to Twitter?
It was a funny story. So Twitter, and I was still playing when I got on Twitter. So this was probably 2009. And I remember, people talking about it, and I finally got an account. And just the idea, it reminded me of Run Ricky Run in the blog, where I get direct communication with my audience. But this time I was more individuated. I had more interesting, unique ideas, and it was very was very nerve-wracking to put my ideas out and share them with the world. I remember I would tweet something and then I'd have to put it away for like 24 hours before I could come back and read the comments. And slowly, it gave me a way to become a more open communicator. And to realize the power that celebrities have because of social media is that if we do have any interesting ideas, we have a way to get those ideas out into the world.
And people want to hear them.
And people want to hear them, yeah. And people want to hear them.
Do you consider yourself to be an influencer? Not in the vapid.
No, I am. I know that I am. And even if I didn't consider myself to be, I know I still would be. I don't know if I'm the kind of influencer that I want to be yet, but I definitely know that I'm an influencer.
What kind do you want to be?
And maybe this is just, the way I see it from my eyes, but I feel like because, my rise to fame was in one area that's so different from
what you're doing now,
what I'm doing now, that it requires people in their minds, if they're going to follow me, right, that they have to follow me. And a lot of people, in astrological and spiritual circles, typically aren't as interested in football as football fans.
As a general rule.
Exactly. As a general rule. And so, it's this weird place where, yes, I have fame, but sometimes it helps me and sometimes it kind of gets in the way. And so I think I'd like to be an influencer for the story of that specific story of, and I think to some extent we all experience this, right? And this comes back to what you said in the beginning of the interview, is I have this belief that we're born and we have a specific, unique path that we're supposed to eventually find in our life. But as soon as we're born, our parents, our culture, our community start saying, no, this is the path you're supposed to go down. Right. And because they offer love and food and they change our diapers, we say, okay, we'll go down your path. And then as we hit our teenage years and our abstract mind starts to develop, we can start to question and find our way to our own individual unique path. And I think, my whole life, culture, everyone around me growing up told me, be a football player. That's the way to make it. And I did that. But in the midst of being a football player, at the height of my career, I got wind of my own unique path. And I realized that it's very different from this path that I'm on. And I think to a certain extent, everyone faces that dilemma of, this is the path I thought I was supposed to be on, but my unique path is somewhere else. Completely different. It might be far, it might be close, but it's not this. And I think we all come to those times in life, and I think we need help. We need encouragement to be able to make that difficult journey to find our own unique path. And I want to be an influencer where I influence people to be open to that possibility and to show them that once you start to live your unique path, life becomes so much more interesting.
What's ahead for the company?
Well, right now we're in talks to be purchased, and because we realize we have we spent the past 2 years proving our concept, and now we're ready to scale and to get this product into as many people's hands as possible. So we're looking for strategic partners. And so we have a big expansion right on the horizon. And I think what is in store for us is when I decided on the name Real Wellness, the main idea was I truly believe from my own experience that there's a true healing power in altered states, and that is that indigenous cultures across the board believe that true healing only occurs in an altered state. And Einstein is famous for saying that a problem can't be solved in the same state of consciousness that created the problem. And I think, the materialistic bent of our world has us, I think, focus too much on materialism. And I think we need to balance that with some connection to something greater. And something about cannabis, specifically THC, kind of lowers our ego's defenses and allows us some more energy and more information, more experiences to come in.
So if somebody wanted to follow you on social media, where can they follow you? So
I do have a lively Instagram, but Linnea helps a lot with that. I mean, she's masterful in taking the astrological language and making it relevant for people. So on Instagram, it's @Williams And then on Twitter, it's at Rick the Laureate. And then I have a website, and mainly people go on the website to book readings, but also to learn more about my background, and that's rickywilliams.life.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
That's it for this time. If you enjoyed our podcast, please write a review on iTunes and tell your friends to subscribe. If you have any questions about influencers or suggestions for future episodes, email them to John at Pfeiffer@pfeifferlaw.com. Thank you for listening.